My Uncle Henry, when I was growing up, used to sit around in my father's house in Fort Greene, Brooklyn, and he'd drink a little bit of joy juice. And after he got, deep into his cups, he'd start telling war stories. He'd say, "Boy, those Italians, they loved us over there. We were kings over there."
You think about these kids, boys, who are being asked to do extraordinary things, who are asked to become men, quite literally. It's really hard to imagine.
They saw stuff that you would not want anybody to see. The horrors of war, stuff that they still think about, stuff they still dream about, stuff they still wake up in a sweat about.
We had no food, and the Americans helped us because we were going to the kitchen and they were giving us food. They're so friendly. You don't think you're in a war when they are there.
It was a learning experience. You look back now, people talk about the war and stuff. Yeah, it's a nice experience to have now.
The Buffalo Soldiers were the first African-American soldiers of the modern regular army. They came into existence in the aftermath of the Civil War. And there were questions about what to do with the African-American soldiers who fought in the Union Army. So it was decided that 4 regiments of African-American troops would be created: the 9th and 10th Cavalry units, and the 24th and 25th Infantry regiments. So those were the original Buffalo Soldiers. The name originated from their service in the American West.
So they say that the Indians equated the matty hair and the skin tone with the buffalo on the plains. That's why they became called the Buffalo Soldier.
It became a marker of respect for African-American soldiers.
And that nickname stuck through the First War and through the Second World War.
In 1898, with the outbreak of the Spanish-Cuban-American War, the Buffalo Soldiers performed extremely well, including rescuing Theodore Roosevelt's Rough Riders regiments at San Juan Hill. And their exploits during the Spanish-Cuban-American War really added to their legacy. World War I is an important turning point. The original Buffalo Soldiers, the 9th and 10th Cavalry and the 24th and 25th Infantry, they actually don't serve in Europe. This was a decision that the War Department made, in large part because they didn't want seasoned, veteran African-American soldiers fighting in the war. They were concerned about the ramifications of having these soldiers fighting other white people. However, their legacy was appropriated by one division of African-American soldiers that did serve in the war, the 92nd Division.
The 92nd was an experiment to see if the Negro could fight as a trained infantryman, and generally was reviewed very negatively by the white press and fairly positively by the black press.
From its beginning, the 92nd Division was tainted by the institutional racism of the Army and the perverse logic of separate but equal. The 92nd Division was cast as a failed experiment, and the War Department, in deciding how to use African-American soldiers in the future, pointed to the alleged failure of the 92nd Division as a rationale for not incorporating African-American soldiers into the United States Army on a large scale.
As African Americans were going in to serve in World War II, there was a lot of pressure by Eleanor Roosevelt and the black media and others to give African Americans a chance to actually fight in battles.
The 92nd Division was reorganized in October of 1942, and similar to how the 92nd Division was organized as a complete regiment until later on in its training process, was commanded predominantly by white men from the South. The sense of camaraderie, cohesiveness, the morale of the 92nd Division was really severely harmed from its inception.
And they formed the 92nd at 4 different places. That's unusual to form a division that far apart. The infantry unit has to build an esprit de corps among themselves, at the bond. Distance made it more difficult. But at that time in our history, we're fighting to save the world for democracy. No congressional delegation in the United States would allow 15,000 Negroes armed in their state to be trained. That's what they thought of you. Eventually, in May of '43, the 92nd was able to go to Arizona, to Huachuca. We stayed there about a year training before we went to Italy. While we were there, we could not go to any town in Arizona. The state of Arizona was off limits to us outside of Huachuca. A lot of logic, isn't it?
And as for me, that's one of the most poignant things about these guys, that here you have young black men who wanted, and in many cases did give their life for democracy, for freedom, but in actuality were still treated as second-class citizens in America.
Segregation was the rule of the day. Everything was ruled by the idea of separate but equal, which translated into separate but unequal.
What they had to overcome just in terms of dealing with that before they could even begin to deal with being in a war. I mean, it's a horrible thing to serve a country that lynches your people.
The genuine struggle of the Buffalo Soldiers was the big question of, why should I fight for a country that's not fighting for me?
I got sick, some kind of respiratory ailment. So they put me in the hospital. Well, they fed me in bed that first week. The next week said, well, no, you don't go down to mess hall and eat. So I got up and I went bouncing down to mess hall. See, I'm just 18 years old, and some of these things I hadn't been confronted with before. I got to that mess hall door, and there's about 5 or 6 blacks standing around the door there, and they said, well, Captain, where you going? He grabbed my arm. I said, told me to come down there and eat. So you can't eat yet. You got to wait till the white guys finish. I looked in there, and the white guys are finished. There wasn't too many of them left. But that's just like somebody slapped me in the face. Now I got to stand out here and wait. It's because he's white. This white privilege thing, and I got to stand here till they finish eating.
That's the America they were defending. And then they went to Europe, where they were treated like human beings.
They assembled us in a town called Leesville, Louisiana. The lawman got up on there and he made an announcement. This division is slated for active theater.
Italy was essentially a civil war during that time, because, you know, not all Italians were in bed with Mussolini and Hitler. And into this morass of enormous military difficulty and social and economic and societal collapse, America dropped 15,000 members of its quote-unquote Negro problem.
They took us up one night on the Arno River, a little town called Pontedera. It's about 15 miles east of Pisa, across the Leaning Tower. And you can see the Leaning Tower across the river. And that was impressive. You know, you read about this in history, and you can see the thing leaning there. But don't shoot at it. You go into jail, you shoot at that thing.
They experienced a different world, experienced an alternate reality, so to speak, you know, and interacting with Italian men and women and children, interacting with people from different parts of the world.
A lot of these Italians had never seen black people before, ever.
I never saw a black man before Buffalo comes here, because we never saw in Italy that soldier, you know.
We knew all about it, about the war and about the Americans had the buffalo and the colored people. And we never experienced before, right enough, because here in Italy we had no colored people.
They were treated like people. That's one of the first times in your life you felt you're just living with people. They weren't white people or red people, they're just people. And they were friendly. They treated us like people, and we treated them like people.
They saw that what America was not necessarily what it could be, that there were other possibilities, that there was a possibility that they could be seen and treated as human beings.
Somebody came to my house, asked my father if he able to stay in this house, because my house has been a very place in Barga, very high up. And my father said, please yourself, do what you want. And 4 or 5 American men came to my house to stay. And believe me, it's been the best time in my life. First of all, one called Antonio, one called Giovanni. Lovely boy, beautiful, and I never tell your father, but I get in love with them, When usually at night play cards together, he hold my hand, and I've been very happy about it. I could remember about that. Never mind, your father never knew that, but don't bother, nobody tell him.
There was a symbiotic relationship between the so-called peasants of northern Italy and the Buffalo Soldiers because they were both poor. And so they had this relationship that was based on, well, we don't have anything either. And also poor people are trusting. That's why they're poor in the first place. So, it was that sort of that open honesty that they had with each other.
They were looking for company, I would say. All of them were talking and show you photographs of their family and talking about their family. And you could see it, that they were looking for company more than anything else.
My uncle stayed in another rural village, and he having grappa. American love grappa. Antonio and Giovanni found out, your uncle have grappa. We like to have it, and we gave you a scatoletta, beans, meat, soap. My mother said, yes. I'm going to give you grappa. You give me soap, and I wash your clothes too, We're very friendly.
War, it has so many type of accessories to it. You need food, you need water. So there's like a give and take. I defend you, you feed me. It's almost like a covenant contract.
There was a real love between these two groups because they saw beyond their differences. They were just bonded by this war and this experience and by the lack of resources that made them have to work together.
And I hope Antonio and Giovanni still in life, happy, because believe me, I'd be loved to see him again. But I'm 77, and maybe at the time Antonio and Giovanni was more older than me, and I'm afraid I never met Giovanni and Antonio anymore, but still in my heart.
When the Buffalo Soldiers were brought over to Italy, they'd moved up through Florence, and they got to an area which was the Cinquale Canal, and part of that area was the Serchio River. And their task was to punch through the Gothic line, which was a huge defensive line set up by the Germans, and Hitler's orders were defend it at all costs.
In Samaclone, Italy in 1944, night after Christmas, that was during the time of the Battle of the Bulge. The Germans began to move all over the world. Everybody had German troops. They were fighting Christmas. Everybody was fighting Christmas in 1944. And we had orders, stand and fight. This means this is your ground. You don't leave it alive.
The place is very quiet. American men around the house, very quiet, very worried. The American very worried, never see a war, never see nothing. But we noticed something happened, The Germany came down.
They overran these troops up in the Churchill Valley. Well, Fox called for an artillery strike on it. And the guy told him, well, that's your position. He said, yeah, but there's more of them than there is of us. So he brought artillery down on his own self. Of course, he perished, and he took out 2 40-man platoons with him. They went into eternity with him. And an untold number of Germans.
He's in the second floor home. His unit is being overrun by an oncoming German advance. He radios in for artillery fire on this location to try and stop this German advance at the cost of his own life, fully aware that an artillery assault on his position was going to result in his death.
Up in Summer Kelowna, there's a monument there, the Buffalo Soldiers who fought there at Christmas in 1944. And it's touching to see, we got a good reputation over there in Italy. The people thought quite a bit, we held them alive, we fed a lot of them and clothed them, and they had human relations with them.
An infantryman marches in the mud and sleeps in the rain. They were the real ambassadors of the African American soldier.
How many young African Americans do you know that if you said 92nd Infantry, they would even know anything at all about them?
The media and general historical view of the 92nd Division was that it was a failure. And only now are people starting to discuss what these men did and the enormous obstacles they faced.
There was a consistent lack of transportation equipment. Replacement troops were not available. There was a constant shortage of navigational equipment and supplies. There was consistent lack of coordination and communication, which ultimately falls on the shoulders of the divisional command, from the top down.
And interestingly enough, when you look at places like Salerno, the bombing of Monte Cassino, Anzio, the Rapido River disaster, these were military losses, basically, with enormous American casualties. Never in any of those accounts have I ever read any accounts of white soldiers running and melting away like chocolate. That was one of the criticisms of the 92nd Division. They melted away like chocolate, You never heard those kind of criticisms launched against the brave white Americans who died in those campaigns.
Unless you study it, most people will think that the majority of African American soldiers were drivers, chefs, cooks, and cleaners. 92nd Infantry Division, even in a book that I've got, which is a U.S. Army Handbook of World War II, states that the 92nd Infantry Division didn't serve overseas. I still don't understand how they fought so bravely and why they fought so bravely when they were being treated the way they were.
This sort of fortitude and strength that allows someone to go into such a difficult situation, be called all kinds of horrible names, but, hold your head up, back straight, and do what you have to do.
Throughout American history, wars have served as an opportunity for African Americans to advance the causes of civil rights, to advance the causes of emancipation during the Civil War, to advance the causes of equal citizenship during the First World War and the Second World War as well.
This was the first time you had soldiers who were serving and said, why am I here? Why am I fighting when I don't get the same kind of rights that a white person or even a German POW gets back home?
So many of the leaders of the modern civil rights movement, Amzie Moore, Medgar Evers, Robert Williams, these were veterans of World War II.
That changed the tone, because when these cats came back from World War II, maybe missing a leg or an arm, they're like, yo, I'm sorry. And that set the seed for the civil rights movement, along with Dr. King and many others.
Beyond racism, ignorance does exist, and there's ways to defeat it. And it's proved from 1944 to 2008 that, these men have made significant contributions.
Most of our history has been thrown in the dump because we put it in the attics. And our kids, until they get to be 40 years old, they don't think about the antecedents, what your parents did. By that time, the kids begin to get, well, you know, what did my father do? What did my grandfather do? And they begin to get a little interested in what some of their parents or grandparents did then.
I see these things about the greatest generation. I mean, and God bless these men and women. They did wonderful work for this country. But, I mean, isn't it time we started looking at, you know, to see that there were some other people involved? To ignore the contributions of 1 million men and women is a lot.
If you could see Giovanni and Antonio today, what would you say to them?
First of all, I've been hold them tight to me, and I kiss them, and I say thank you for what you did. And I hope they two came home, because I never know if they two able to go back, because the war is terrible. I wonder what happened to the two. I mean, sometimes I think about it, and I pray God in safe home, and maybe the family. I want to know the proud you be to have a father during the war in Italy.